First, I want to thank everyone for joining. I know we had a long week last week due to the election, and I'm glad to say that it's finally over, right? Regardless of everyone's preferences, I think it was a great day for democracy itself. We had over 140 million people vote, and it looks like we're creeping up to the 150 million number. We might actually exceed the 150 ballots cast number. And I think that's a great milestone. And another great thing is that we made it easier for people to vote, which I hope is a trend that continues well past COVID. So today I'm going to speak about the main issues that we'll be tackling at the city, at the state level, and at the federal level, especially in the next legislative cycle. As you already know, the federal level, House Democrats lost quite a few seats, maintaining the majority, a slim majority, but still have the majority. They'll likely re-elect Speaker Nancy Pelosi for at least one more term. There is some inner turmoil in the Democratic Party right now in the House because of those seats lost. Our very own Congresswoman, Cheri Bustos, in the 14th District, she was, as you all know, she was the chairwoman of the DCCC, the Democratic Campaign Congressional Committee, who was in charge of electing Democrats and raising money for them. Unfortunately, she had a pretty rough showing in terms of gaining the seats that they were projected to gain. So, and it came out this morning that she will not seek another term in that post. So we'll see who takes up that mantle. We have a new Congresswoman in the 3rd District, Democrat Maureen Newman. I've reached out to her team today so we can start that conversation with her on behalf of the nonprofit sector. And the 14th District, Congresswoman Cheri Bustos was not the 14th District. I screwed that up. I'm sorry. The 14th District is still too close to call with State Representative Jim Oberweis of Oberweis Dairy, if you remember, and Lauren Underwood. It was assumed a couple days ago that Lauren Underwood would win it, and then this morning it kind of changed. They're still counting ballots, so we'll see what happens with that. And Lauren Underwood has been a tremendous ally for us in the House too, so she's been a big supporter of nonprofits. So we'll see where that takes us. The Senate is still up for grabs with 2 runoff races in Georgia that will decide control, and that would, if the Democrats win those 2 seats, then we'll go to a 50-50 split with Vice President Harris breaking the tie. So on January 5th, we'll know exactly who has control of the chamber. And obviously, Joe Biden, projected winner of the presidency. And forefront, we have sent our congratulatory letters to all who have been reelected, and we look forward to working with everybody who was reelected and all of our state legislature and all of our congressional delegation. At the state level, not much has changed. A few seats were lost here and there, but the Democrats have maintained their supermajority both in the House and the Senate. There is some inner turmoil for the speakership post. As you all know, the Speaker Madigan has held that for close to 40 years. And there's prominent Democrats calling for his removal of the state party, removal from the chairman of the state party. And there have been some we had another one this morning, yesterday, Representative Bob Morgan, who said he will not vote for Speaker Madigan. So it's been a trend. So we'll see how January goes. January is going to be very interesting in Springfield. And we'll see how far along that takes us. Regardless of Speaker Madigan being speaker or not, it doesn't change our priorities. As a nonprofit sector, we have great champions on both sides of the aisle, and whoever takes over will be ready and willing to work with everybody. One significant thing at the state level is our fair tax amendment. Our fair tax amendment has failed. It was devastating to supporters of the amendment, and now the governor has to fill in the gaps in other ways. There is talk of raising income taxes, a whole percentage point for everybody. There is talk of, there's definitely going to be some budget cuts. How severe those budget cuts? We've heard 15% across the board. We know that our agencies have been asked to cut 5%. Before the election, we heard that, but now after fair taxes failed, I'm hearing things of close to 7% cuts in all the agencies. So we'll see exactly how that goes. We all know that fair tax would have probably helped nonprofits, most likely helped nonprofits. but we now have to navigate past this and advocate that the sector will not be damaged in the long run. Good news is that our governor, compared to our previous governor, is more compassionate towards the nonprofit sector. So I know that his team will do what they can to try to limit the blow. And we have a great advocate in Secretary Ho at Human Services. So we're hoping that we're going to be working with them for the next few months and to figure out exactly how we can help. So that's kind of a rundown of the election. We can kind of move over now into what we'll be advocating for the sector. So with the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives, chances are it will remain divided along party lines. So it will be difficult for Congress to pass major legislation for the next few years, at least. This means that nonprofits probably shouldn't expect any major changes to employment laws, tax laws, healthcare policy, or any other program. So Congress will begin to start negotiating on much needed COVID relief. We were advocating very hard to try to get this done before the election, because what I kind of feared is happening in terms of President Trump losing the election, and we were trying to figure out what kind of incentive he would have to sign something before he leaves office. So it's either we can get something done, and Mitch McConnell has said that he wants to get something done. So we kind of hope that something does get done. Forefront and other nonprofits across the country, we really urge Congress to act swiftly on some of these on this legislation, because our state, especially our state, needs the money in terms of to fill the gaps in our state and fill the gaps in our city, especially the city of Chicago. So I just want to go through all of the little things that we have been advocating for, some things we've been successful on. Improving the Paycheck Protection Program. Many of our nonprofits, we haven't released it yet, but we did have a survey out there that closes up, I think, at the end of this week. And I saw some of those results already. And out of the close to 500 people that answered the survey, we had 80% of those people, I believe it was about 80% that benefited off of the Paycheck Protection Program. So that's good news. So we're going to continue to advocate from a second round of forgivable PPP loans, and also the simplification of forgiveness. Something we're trying to do before the election was anyone who had, well, the SBA did release some rules that said anyone who borrowed $50,000 or less. It was a very simple one-page form, and we were trying to shoot that to $150,000. So that's one thing that we're working on, and we did get that into the Senate bill. Another thing we did get into the Democrat Senate proposal that was introduced about a month ago is the Paycheck Protection Program for anyone who had, any nonprofit who had 500 employees or more. Something I've been working on for the last 6-7 months here at the state level to try to really push. And we had great meetings with Senator Durbin, Senator Duckworth, and we had a great meeting actually with Senator Marco Rubio's staff as well, who they were somewhat open to it. And I think now after the election, I think they will be a little bit more lenient on those. So we're hoping that sticks around in the next Senate bill. Another thing that we're working on is to strengthen the universal charitable deduction. The CARES Act capped the temporary charitable deduction at $300 per taxpayer, and only for the year 2020. So we are trying to work to extend that for 2021, and we're also working to kind of raise the cap on that. We're hopeful. We'll see what happens with our new Senate bill that I heard it's going to be introduced. An updated version of our Senate bill will be introduced in the next few weeks. Another thing we are working on is to extend the unemployment insurance relief. The CARES Act provided federal funds to cover 50%. The state, Illinois, did cover the other 50%. And nonprofits are asking to cover the other 50% and to extend unemployment insurance relief up until 2021. They're also seeking extension of the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, which provides unemployment insurance benefits to self-employed individuals and laid off or furloughed workers at small and religious nonprofits as well. And we're also trying to extend the additional, which we were successful and getting it into the HEROES Act in the House to extend the unemployment relief. We know that the president did sign off on the $400 additional, and we're hoping that we can extend the $600 retroactively for those who were furloughed. We are working on to, and this is actually something in the survey that I just saw that not a lot of nonprofits took advantage of because they couldn't use both the Paycheck Protection Program and the Employee Retention Tax Credit. So as you know, the CARES Act created the Employee Retention Tax Credit as a refundable tax credit for nonprofits that maintained their employees during the pandemic. Relatively few nonprofits used it since employers that received PPP loans could not use this at the same time. So something that we're advocating for is that to use them both, to allow to use them both, to keep PPP and also get the credit for maintaining employees. And that's something that we're going to be really pushing for, especially after January. And the biggest thing, and which is really going to impact our state and our city, is to provide additional aid and state and local government relief. We have been asking Congress to provide more federal support for state and local governments. The additional funding is critical to help state and local governments continue to provide essential services despite growing revenue shortfalls. And as you know, in Illinois, we are experiencing tremendous shortfalls. The House supported the funding in their new HEROES Act, but the Senate has opposed it. They have somewhere met in the middle prior to the election. Well, less than the middle, I should say. So we'll see what happens in the next few weeks. I know Congress is coming back next week. So we'll see where that takes us and how the negotiations go. Another thing that we're pushing for in the new COVID relief package is federal dollars to help nonprofits and communities. So this discussion around assistance programs, SNAP program, food banks, arts and humanities, domestic violence organizations, legal services, nonprofits, hospitals, mental health service providers, and community development block grant, which we were trying to get federal funding for those as well. And we'll see how that goes in the next few weeks. But the great short-term stuff that we can really count on President-elect Biden to do is to really reverse a lot of damaging executive orders that we've seen over the last 4 years, and some most recently in the last few months. There's a very, very good chance, I'm almost betting everything on it, that President-elect Biden will reverse the executive order for federal contractors for grantees to provide workplace training on equity, diversity, and inclusion. It created a lot of serious problems for us. As you know, President Trump signed an executive order to halt federal contracts that were, I think, signed after November 10th, or actually, no, not today's November 10th, November 20th, that federal money will not be allowed to go to these nonprofits who do these programs for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think that will be reversed, or most likely that will be reversed. That's very good news. Another thing that he will relieve pressure on is something that we've been going to, especially with Foundations on the Hill, that we take the foundations on. The Johnson Amendment was always something in the back of the mind of the White House to try to repeal. So it looks like the President-elect Biden will back off on that, and we don't have to hopefully worry about that for the next 4 years. And the Johnson Amendment is a rule that states that nonpartisan politics cannot be involved in nonprofits. So, and that's something that was heavy on our minds in 2018, 2019 when we were heading to DC. And also the Biden administration we think that they will create rules in the Department of Labor to help workers. And we think that some good stuff may come out of there. And some of those SBA rules and some of those SBA rules will somewhat be reversed or strengthened in terms of the way we look at it. But it's going to be we're hoping that it will be a more friendly Department of Labor than it has been in the last 4 years. So those are the main things that we're hoping for and fighting for at the federal level for next year. We spent a lot of time on this stuff this year, and it's really imperative that we get a lot of this done for next year for the strength and the retention of our nonprofits. I'll be spending a lot of time with those things because with this type of help and the state help, especially our federal money that comes into the state, it'll make my job easier at the state level, which is getting harder and harder every day when there's no federal money coming to the state. So the state, as you know, has seen significant shortfall in our tax revenue. Before I get into the state issues, does anybody have any questions or comments or concerns or additions to anything federally? Okay, so we'll move over to the state issues. The state, as you know, are we? Oh, okay, we're good. Sorry. The state, as you know, has seen really significant shortfall in our tax revenue due to COVID. We're expecting that the state will make significant tax code changes in terms of raising income tax level and slashing budgets. As you all know, this sector is always seen as the first place where government cuts, especially our human services. But we're hopeful and fortunate that our governor is a bit more compassionate to our sector than his predecessors. So we don't know exactly how bad things will be, but we're doing everything we can to protect the sector. We're in constant contact with the governor's office, especially these next few months are going to be critical, especially before these cuts go through, to make sure that we are not going to be hurt significantly. We know we're going to see reductions, but we're hopeful that we have some allies in the governor's office. So this makes every reason why passing the COVID relief package with state and local money attached is very imperative. And we recently had Senator Heather Stearns at our policy meeting, and she stressed the importance of money from Washington, which will dictate how the state budget works. So we're still hopeful. We're still hopeful that this new COVID relief package lightens the load with us a little bit. So we'll see how that goes. We will, however, stick to many of our plans that we had over the last year, and we had some traction with at the state level, although it may be a bit harder simply because of the failure of the fair tax. We'll continue to try and raise the audit threshold, something that we've been working on. Well, we got it introduced earlier this year. We had some traction on it. We were talking to the Attorney General's office on this as well, winning them over, which was important to this legislation in the state. And then COVID hit and everything kind of took a pause. So hopefully next year in January, if things go back to normal, we can actually introduce legislation next year. We'll see how that goes, and we're going to work on that again. So our goal was to raise our audit threshold. We are currently the lowest threshold in the country. We had a great analysis thanks to the National Council of Nonprofits that Illinois stood at $300,000. So those nonprofits who receive $300,000 in contributions have to get an automatic audit. 300,000 is the lowest across the country. The next state is 500,000. Most states are at 750,000, and some states are at $1 million. We did get some pushback a little bit from the AG's office, but we're still talking with them, and we're thinking that we may come down to, hopefully we'll come down. Our goal was to get to 750, but it looks like we might get to at least 500 if we can introduce things next year. So we'll see how that goes. And this would save a tremendous amount of money for nonprofits who pay a lot of money for their audits. So I think that that will go a long way for a lot of smaller nonprofits. We're still working on Endow, Illinois, which we know we did have some traction prior to COVID, but now since COVID took over, Endow, Illinois is a tax credit for community foundations. So that's going to be a bit harder, obviously, since the state hasn't really seen a big reduction in tax money. But we'll try anyway, and we'll see how the landscape is for next year. Another thing we're trying to do is raising the charitable trust budget from the Illinois State Treasurer's Office. If you're unaware, the state treasurer has a charitable trust that gives out $25,000 grants to nonprofits, specifically to nonprofits, and that money comes from the fee, the fee that you pay to become a nonprofit in the state of Illinois. I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the form. So all those fees go into one pot, and then they grant those to nonprofits at $25,000 a piece. Significant for a lot of nonprofits, but right now the only people that can apply are nonprofits with a budget of $1 million or less. We've been working with them, and we're going to raise it. It looks like we have the support, so hopefully next year we can get it through. We're going to raise it from 1 million to 2 million to kind of add some more names to the pot, and hopefully allow more nonprofits to access those funds. So that's mostly it in terms of what we're going to try to do next year. A lot of my focus, most of my focus is usually on state government and trying to do what I can at the state level. But federal advocacy is just the utmost important right now to make sure that we get COVID relief, because without that, like I said, it's going to be a very long year and it could be a very devastating one. So we're hoping that's not the case. What veto session looks like, nobody knows. Is it happening? Are we going to Springfield in January? Will they take up bills like they normally do in January? We're not sure. This morning it was said, I had a text exchange with a state senator this morning that I said, am I going to be there in Springfield in January? And he said, I have no clue. So, and he's a pretty prominent state senator, and he doesn't know yet. So we don't know. I'm eager to get to Springfield, but we'll see, and time will tell on that end. The city of Chicago, again, their budget needs to be passed next month. We know that there will be significant cuts. We know that the arts community, I think Claire is on this call. Yeah, Claire is here. So I'm pretty sure that they had almost a 50% budget cut in their budget with the city of Chicago. And there were a few cuts in our human service sector. But as I was listening to the budget hearings over the last few weeks, there's still some significant changes to come. And it really also depends on that COVID relief. And the city of Chicago has a $800 million backlog. And if we get a COVID relief package, that might change and alter some of the cuts that we're seeing. And it can also change the whole trajectory of the city budget. And I'll give you an update when I can on that. Another thing of City of Chicago, the last thing I'll speak about is the Chicago lobbying law. I spent really a significant amount of time on this issue over the last year and a half since it was first brought up and introduced, and since Mayor Lightfoot took office. We're inching closer and closer to our goal. As of now, we have stopped the implementation of the law. We have stopped the implementation of the law until January 2021, so we stopped it for a few more months. And we are heavily involved in amending the law to make it better for the sector. We have an amendment being drafted with our input and with others as well before its hopeful introduction in December. We will share it with key groups from around the city to make sure it's palpable. I think that if we get it done the way that we imagine it, this would help probably 90% of the nonprofits in the city of Chicago. This would include, so just so you know, this would include a financial quarterly threshold and a quarterly hour threshold. There's still some disagreement on how much the financial threshold is per quarter. But it looks like it might be a number where we'll finally agree on a number where majority of nonprofits would not have to register to begin with. And also the hourly threshold. So if you're not lobbying, we don't have the hours set yet. That's another point of contention, which I think will be resolved in the next few weeks. Obviously I'm going as high as I can to try to, and the Chicago Lawyers Committee is working with us, and there's a bunch of us trying to raise that threshold so that the nonprofits do not have to register to begin with. We tried, and I promise you that we tried to get rid of it altogether. And I'm still using that argument with the city that our nonprofits are, and I'm sorry if there's a lot of people here not from the city of Chicago, I apologize. But I'm trying to use the argument that the nonprofits are worried about staying alive. This, horrible law that they tried to enact is really not on the minds of the nonprofits. There was some traction to maybe, try to raise those thresholds even higher than they originally anticipated so that it won't be an issue. But getting rid of it altogether, and this thing, trying to get rid of it altogether, unfortunately doesn't look like we can do that, but we're doing everything we can to make it less burdensome on nonprofits. And I'm meeting with nonprofits around the city and foundations throughout the city. And if we do not get this amendment drawn up in December, I've been pushing to halt the law until January 2022, so a whole year. So we're hoping that doesn't happen. We're hoping that we can kind of settle this once and for all. But if we don't, we'll be doing everything we can to make sure that nobody has to worry about this at least for another year. So that's something that we're working on. So let me just go to the chat and see if there's any. 50% we're pushing reduction towards direct grants. Okay, so Claire Rice says, yep, that's 50% cut, budget cut in the arts community for the city of Chicago, and they're working to reallocate towards direct grants. And the lobbying piece is hugely important, Brian. This last 7 months would have been brutal with those regulations in place. Yeah, the regulations, if you're unfamiliar with them, the new definition of lobbying, according to the city, was so broad, and it was as little as one communication with the city would be considered lobbying. It was just absolutely devastating, and it really didn't make much sense. And it wasn't. And I know Allison's on here too, and she was part of these conversations. I remember a while ago. It was just not consistent with the IRS law either. So we'll see. We'll see how that works out. But I'm optimistic. The city did hear from us. I mean, the reason that we're going through this now is because we made a big stink about it, and nonprofits got together at all levels and really just pushed back against the mayor's office and city council. So it was a big win on our part to push this back, and I'm really optimistic that we'll get to a very good conclusion. Brian, could you share when you think we'll know when the state will begin to decide which departments will require budget cuts? So they're, from what I know, and if anybody else knows anything, please let me know. From what I know, they're holding off on releasing any sort of information in terms of budget cuts to figure out exactly if COVID relief passes prior to January, because obviously that's going to have a huge impact. And like I said, we don't know whether or not the president will sign something, or if they'll come to an agreement. Honestly, who knows? Before January 20th. So we'll see. If you have if anybody has any questions, you can please speak or ask it in the chat. Or if anybody else has any comments or anything that you think I've missed, please, don't hesitate to say something.
I'd like to thank you.
Oh, thank you.
You've kept your pulse on a tremendous amount of movement at a national, state, and local level, and it's a lot. And it sounds like everything's on target, and it just makes me feel comfort that you're keeping your eye on it. So thanks, Brian.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, this was the most, since I've been at Forefront, the most federal I've ever done. So it's been, but it's, it's important work. So it's fun to do. I know Tiffany, sorry to call you out, Tiffany. I know you're on here. If you have anything that you think I missed or something from Washington sorry to call you out, Tiffany.
No problem. Hey, Brian. I did have to step away from my computer for about the last 5 minutes, but it sounded like you covered everything, at least federally. I missed the state part, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you very much. Tiffany, everybody, is from the National Council of Nonprofits.
Hey, Brian, we had a question from Allison in the chat asking if Forefront is thinking about any advocacy at the state or city level around making contracting with government easier for nonprofits. Oh, and now is the moment on Zoom when it looks like somebody's frozen and we're not sure where the...
she's in DC.
Oh, there you are.
They're tremendous help.
Hey, Brian, I'm having trouble hearing you. Oops. Okay. So yep, now is the moment on Zoom when we have a connection issue, and we tap dance for a little bit, but while we wait for Bryan to get reconnected. I appreciate all the questions that you all have shared so far, and I know that there, as Bryan mentioned, there's a lot of expertise in the room along with him when he rejoins us. So just welcome your continued questions if you want to throw those into the chat, or if you want to take a minute to formulate them while we wait for Bryan to get back into the room with us here. We appreciate that.
I have a question for Tiffany, I think.
Oh, great. Let's do that.
How's that? Hi, Tiffany. I'm a regular father. And I know you have relationships, obviously, with all of our other partner entities. I'm not quite sure exactly what they're called. But my question for you is, are there...
Sorry, guys. My internet just went out and now I'm on my phone, so I apologize.
You're good, Bryan. You didn't miss anything. My question is are there other regional, partners like Forefront that are actually working on any other types of racial?
Mary, I think you got muted there. I think the question though was about racial equity and inclusion.
All right, I'm back.
Okay, it was the question about racial equity and inclusion?
Yeah,
issues?
yeah. I was going to ask you if there's, besides unwinding the executive order that was put in place on September 22nd, are there any other regional associations or state associations that are looking to take a little bit more of an aggressive approach related to racial equity at a national level that you've heard of yet?
Yeah, so there's a few kind of bigger groups. I know that you work with United Philanthropy Forum, and they're redoing their policy agenda right now. I was just speaking with Matthew, I think last week, about kind of their policy agenda, which will be very racial justice focused. I believe, so we work with, the YWCA pretty regularly. They have a very good racial justice arm. They've been leading the issue on the executive order that you just mentioned. We are actually redoing our policy agenda as we speak, and we're trying to make it a little bit more racial justice focused. I don't think it will be as aggressive as some of the other groups, but it is something that's very top of mind for us as well. But what shape that looks like, we're not quite sure. I think our goal within the National Council is to kind of include it into every area instead of having it as like a separate issue. So whether it be, instead of having it like, we have 5 issues and it be issue 6, it would be incorporated in. So things that I know that you were mentioning earlier, Bryan, the budget, right? So how can state budgets look more equitable for, Black-led or BIPOC-led organizations? How can we hit those kind of communities a little bit better and bring them to the forefront of issues? Things like the broadband gap and the, making sure that people have access to the internet. I know that that's something that Forefront has been very concerned about, and so has others in the network. And so we haven't quite drilled down what it's going to look like, but I know that we're trying to incorporate it in that aspect. Does that answer the question? Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Marion. Thanks, Tiffany, for jumping in there. Bryan, I think you had just started to answer the question about our work or thoughts around advocacy at the state level to make it easier to contract with government when we lost you. So I don't know if you would mind revisiting that response. That'd probably be helpful.
Yeah, no, I was trying to figure out my talking points on that. I thought I was talking about the Wednesday morning. I just want to bring this up real quick before I forget. Wednesday morning on Good Day Chicago, Tim Delaney, the president of the National Council of Nonprofits, will be on Good Day Chicago speaking about nonprofits, and he'll hopefully kind of gear it towards Illinois nonprofits as well. We did give him some good talking points in terms of what's going on at the state level here. But he's going to provide a really great overview to the city and to the state on those efforts. So look forward to watching him on Wednesday morning. In terms of the contracts, yeah, no. So we're, and I think, I don't know if Tiffany said this when I was gone. I'm sorry, my internet went out. is we're very hopeful that President-elect Biden will reverse those executive orders. And probably, and also from what I heard a couple of days ago, is that they'll reverse those, but also add more measures to increase federal contracts in terms of increasing those sessions and those classes on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we're looking forward to that if and when he does that. And it looks like he'll probably do that in the first week from what we're hearing.
Anything at the state or the city level, Bryan, in terms of our advocacy around making that contracting between government and nonprofits easier?
Honestly, I I don't know anything specific. I'm sure there are, but I do not know anything specific just yet. Oh, yes. Allison Angeloni just said something perfect. He's thinking more about the burning GATA on small nonprofits. Yep. So GATA, as you know, is the Government Accountability Transparency Act. We kind of started a little bit last year, and we were supposed to get into it this year in terms of trying to remove a lot of the precautions in terms of allowing nonprofits to get federal and state money a little bit easier without all the protections of GATA. There are some things that we spoke as a group with some of the people who really know GATA, Illinois Human Services, and other organizations. And we're going to try to come to some conclusions and agreements on what we can introduce to the state to lessen the burden of reporting, because that's a huge issue that nonprofits have, especially small nonprofits. And it really does put small nonprofits, minority-led nonprofits, in a very unfortunate position in terms of them not just applying because they don't have the capacity to do it. So that's something that we're hopeful that next year we could make a really big dent in. Thank you, Allison.
And if I can jump in here, I do want to thank Illinois and Forefront for leading some government contracting reform issues. We've been able to use that and make that a trend across the country because of the work that you're doing in Illinois. So thank you for Maryland was able to do something, DC here was able to do something because of the work that you were doing. And so I know that things like streamlining processes, just reporting requirements, having government agencies talk to one another, which is such a novel idea for everyone. I don't know why it is, but because Illinois is doing that, we are able to share that nationwide. So thank you, Bryan, for leading such a great cause.
Thank you. And thanks to our member groups, honestly. Without them, there's so many people that have much more expertise than I do that really help and guide me with our members. So thank you to all our members.
Any other questions from anyone in the room here, or other things that you'd like to add from your perspective? Again, knowing that there are a lot of folks who are steeped in advocacy work along with Bryan here. I'd love to hear from you. Mary, thank you, is asking, is there any discussion on easing GPRA nationally? And maybe you could give us a primer on what that stands for, Bryan.
GPRA, Mary?
GPRA.
I'm not familiar with it.
No, it's national reporting. It's very similar to what you were just describing for GATA, which is funny because I've not heard GATA, but I always hear all of our grantees talk about GPRA, which is all of the reporting requirements that's mandated at a congressional level for grantees to get any type of funding from agencies. Federal. Yeah, federal. Okay. But that's like, huge lift, but that would be significant.
Maybe this is something that we could speak with the National Council on if there's ever anything on there. But yeah, no, our main, I shouldn't say our main thing, we'll obviously look at GPRA too, but GATA has been, I think a majority, I shouldn't say this because I don't know it. I would assume a majority of our nonprofits get their rely on the state for the money. And I'm assuming some do have federal contracts, but I've actually never heard that. So I'll look into that as well.
All right, Tiffany, I saw you unmute for a second there. Was there anything you wanted to add?
I was just going to say we haven't heard about any talks about it recently. So, but yeah, Bryan and I can talk about it if it is something that is important to your members, because that's something that we want to look into if needed.
And I just want to say, if anybody has ever, I mean, feel free to email me whenever you want in terms of if there's things that you think we're missing on or things that you're having a hard time with, and that's something that's not on our radar, please let us know. You know, we're willing and able to work on whatever we can to really help nonprofits. So if you ever have anything that that's not on our radar, please let me know.
While folks are maybe thinking about other questions that they have, Bryan, anything in terms of like a call to action, things that you want to ask these the folks who are in this room to be ready for or to be doing right now?
Yeah, so absolutely. So it's critical now at this time, and thanks to the National Council has provided us with some great talking points and some great letterheads to go out there to our membership to sign on to really push our congressional delegation and our senators to really come to a conclusion on this on COVID relief. So there's going to be a lot of calls to action over the next few months, and I would imagine there's going to be a lot of calls to action, you know, come after January 20th, right, to push the new Congress to do a lot of things. So please look out for emails from Forefront from us to sign on to letters, and hopefully within the next, you know, it was tough this year. I did it a lot last year, and this year is much tougher, obviously, because of COVID. But hopefully, if we can start meeting people again, what I've done over the last 2 years is take a lot of our members with me to certain meetings, and it really does add a nice touch to, you know, getting that feel for meeting legislators and especially people in your district. Something I did a lot in 2018, a lot in 2019, and unfortunately not so much in 2020. But we're hoping to get that back up and running, hopefully by the spring.
Thanks, Bryan. Well, I'll make a last call for questions, or if there is anything that you wanted to add to the discussion that you've been sitting on and waiting for the right moment. I'm going to say that moment is now. But we really appreciate all of you joining us, Bryan. Thank you so much. I'll just echo as your colleague. I will echo what others have said, and that the work that you do on behalf of the sector is so valued and so valuable. So thank you, and thanks for summarizing it for all of us today. Bryan, do you want to throw I'm hoping that everyone on this call maybe already has your contact information, but do you mind just throwing that in the chat in case folks have questions or want to bring anything to you after this call is over? And with that, I think that we will adjourn a little early. But again, thanks so much everyone for joining us. I hope you get to enjoy some sunshine today and some deep breaths. Take good care, everyone.
Good to see you, Jim.